Hi, this is Ron Dwyer-Voss. Hope you all are doing well. I'm just going to go over fairly quickly a nice little exercise called the Resident Power Ladder. It's something you can do with people in your community, or you can do as a team, thinking about the people in your community. Both are effective, but at different things. It's often most effective to do this with people from your community. One of the things that makes ABCD so powerful is its focus on empowering residents to take action and produce the outcomes of their community, and or partnering with them as they do that. And a lot of the places where residents can do that is where they have access to decision making. And a lot of times our programs aren't set up to enable that. So this sort of helps us see where residents have some ability to act and create and change things, otherwise known as power, and where they might be somewhat limited. So the ladder here talks about 4 general levels. Obviously there's some overlap and it's more complex, but this works pretty well to think about these 4 distinctions at the bottom of the ladder. We have residents as recipients. These are programs or projects where people come to get services or information, and that's all. That's their role. They're consumers. So oftentimes, say, a food bank might be this type of thing. Most folks would say that a school, the youth in a school are recipients. They might have some say over how they use a study hall or something like that. And they might get to pick a couple of electives, but they never pick what the curriculum is or how the school runs. So that's where they would be defined as recipients. Then there's other programs that seek out information from residents. And in those programs or projects or agencies are trying to get information from their constituents so they can do a better job. So anything that's surveying people or doing focus groups to find out stuff. I know cities right now, it's very popular for them to send out surveys or do online Facebook type surveys asking folks what they appreciate and what they would like improved about various city services. And so that's an example of residents as information sources. Residents as participants is a level where residents are really advisors or advocates. They are participating in a meaningful way. I mean, all of these are meaningful in their own way, but at this level, residents are maybe not just providing information, but are analyzing information and advocating for an outcome. They might be advising decision makers about what decision to make. So in this case, things like youth advisory committees, library advisory committees are places where agencies often seek out resident participation, more than just information, but for voice. Ultimately, at this level, residents still don't have the power to act, but they do have the power to speak and to develop their opinion of what they're saying. And then the top of the ladder is residents in control. This is where residents set goals, plan tasks, implement them, and basically create and co-create the quality of life in the neighborhood. And this is the place where people like to engage. Granted, different types of things call for different levels of participation. Most of us are quite happy to be recipients of our water and wastewater systems where we live, and just happy to get water and be able to flush it away and not have to be involved a lot in how that works. But there's a lot of things where folks are engaged, where if they could be closer to the top of the ladder, they might engage more. And if you remember, a lot of our learning conversation lessons are about finding out where people have gifts to share. And that often where people have gifts to share, we have to create room for them to share, and that means creating room for them to act, and that means giving them some control. So it's really helpful to look at this and say, where are our different projects and programs? April sent you a great step-by-step guide on that. I'm going to highlight a couple of things for that real quick here. So here's a couple ways to do it. The upper left corner has the power ladder displayed as a triangle with open space for each level. The one to the far right, there's a card that says recipients. Then the next one says info sources. The next one says participant, advisors, advocates. And the top one says in control. And what you do is you have folks think about the programs and projects that they interact with in their community, if you're doing this with residents, and write down each program or project on one card. So summer reading that children participate in at the local library would be on a card. Little League Baseball would be on a card. Quilting group would be on a card. Resident association would be on a card. So each project or program gets a card, and then you have people place them on the floor in the level where they feel residents are at in that program. For example, summer reading program, you would probably put as recipients, children come to the library, they mark which books they've read, they get a prize, and they check out some more books. They're not really designing or controlling that program, they're just participating, which is great. Local parks might be in any number one of these places. Some local parks have community gardens and various things that residents run. Some are completely recipient and programmed by the city. If on the right-hand side, you see a power ladder created to look like a ladder, actually. And same idea, though. Along the left-hand side is the categories, and they use Post-it notes in this one, wrote down program name. Each program got its own Post-it note and was put on the ladder where it is. Here you can see some folks these were public health workers, and they looked at all the different programs that ran out of their clinics and their public health programs. And you can see this happens quite a bit, where most of the programs fall in the recipient category. In this particular case, they had quite a few in the advisory category. These were community health workers, so they had a lot of things where residents advised and advocated. Very few where residents had control, and also very few where they were information sources. The idea is to, you can do this as we just showed as an interactive kinesthetic activity, works really well. The other is you can sit down at a desk with a few people and think about it. In either case, at the end, you should try to fill out a table like this, and April's given you a copy, where along the left-hand column you have a project or program, or a, what you call it, a row for each project or program. And then next to that, you should say, for this one, who are the residents? Because sometimes it's a specific subset, and if it is, you should say that. It might be teens, it might be seniors, it might be people with physical disabilities. And so if that's the case, you would want to put that there. Otherwise, you just put residents at large. Then you know, where are they on the power ladder right now? And then discuss where is the ideal place for them to be. As I mentioned, I think for most of us, the ideal place for the program of water and wastewater is to be recipients. And that's, I think most people would agree, that's just fine. But in many other activities and projects in any given neighborhood, then there might be a more ideal location up the ladder. So this isn't where you're saying where we are, this is where you're saying where we think would be the best place for residents to be on that power ladder. And for example, I've seen groups recognize that park programming, often residents are information sources, they fill out surveys, and then park and rec departments program accordingly. Often groups realize that to get better engagement and better participation in programs and higher quality programs, if they move residents up that ladder where they're at least advising on the programming of the park, and even where they're running some of the programming in the park or at a community center, that they can have stronger outcomes around community and quality of life. So that's what you do with that fourth column. For your guys' project, we're wanting to look also and give you a chance to reflect on where was this program at the beginning of your project launch, and where are the residents now? Has your project helped move programs up the power ladder in terms of the role residents have in those programs? And so the last column is often one of the most important ones, and why I have groups do this twice a year or at least annually, is to say what steps would move residents up the ladder. What are some actions we can take as a group to move residents up the power ladder, promote and support citizen-driven, resident-led activity, and then go back and do it again in 6 months, a year, and look at it and say, how are we doing with that? These are the basic ideas of the power ladder. Again, it's an exercise that doesn't lead you to answers, but hopefully gives you a nice, you and your team, and ideally your community residents, a nice look visually at all the programs and projects in a neighborhood and what type of power residents have in those. And then to think about where could we easily create room for more resident power. And the reality is, and we know this from lots of experience, that if we create resident power in some small things, people will gain the confidence to take power on bigger things. I've seen it many, many times where a community garden project or a park cleanup or a mural project that was owned, designed, driven, produced by residents leads those same residents to take on what seemed like tougher issues to begin with, like maybe drug deals or gang violence or traffic safety in an area. So this really becomes the beginning point for thinking about how to help residents get the power they need to create the community they want.